Hello and welcome to my channel. It is halfway through the year already, and that means I'm doing the mid-year freakout tag. And if you haven't heard of this tag before, it's basically just a bunch of questions about different books I've read this year and books I'm excited about for the second half of the year. If you watched my last video, you know that I just completed an exam which I was studying for a while, and that was basically the equivalent of the bar for my career. So I have not read as much as I would want to this first half of the year, but I am determined to read more the second half. I straight up did not read for like a month and a half. Anything at all that was not study material. Let's get started with the first question. The first question is, what is the best book I've read this year so far? I actually have two books that are the best. I cannot decide between the two of them, but they're actually kind of similar. They're both about two people who find each other early in life but separate, and it's the story of them like finding each other again. For one, they separate kind of a few times. For the other, it's a very large gap before they find each other again. But the first book I want to tell you guys about, which you've probably heard about, but I think it's worth the hype, is Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow. And this book is about Sadie and Sam and the story of them building these beautiful, creative video games together. They start out when Sam is in a hospital, and he's been in a hospital for a long time, and Sam is there in the hospital because her sister has cancer, and they use video games to kind of escape from reality in their life. And it's just such a beautiful, heartbreaking story. You absolutely do not have to like video games to like this book. I am not a huge video game person at all. I think I mostly just play Animal Crossing, but this book actually made me appreciate video games a little bit more, because I think this book does a really amazing job describing making a video game for somebody who's like not interested in that at all. If you love video games, you're gonna probably love this book even more. And while Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is about a friendship who comes together and separates, comes together again, the next book, The Stationery Shop, is more about a romance. This book weaves together romance really well with like political upheaval, and it's about two teenagers, Roya, who's a girl who's from a good family, and Batman, who's from an even better family, but he is definitely more political, and them coming together in secret at Stationery Shop, which is basically like a bookstore in Iran, and them being then separated in the middle of the Iranian Revolution, and Roya especially not knowing what happened to Batman, because he is a known political adversary for the government. This book is absolutely heartbreaking, but like in the best way ever. So those two books were like amazing. Highly recommend. I don't know if I'm gonna top them at all this year, but very, very highly recommend. The next question is, what new releases am I excited about? And I am honestly not a big person to be looking out for new releases, but one that I did see on the book Instagram is called Out There Screaming, and it is edited by Jordan Peele, and it's an anthology of Black horror, and I'm excited. It's coming out, I believe, like October 3rd, and perfect in time for like all the ghosty, spooky, Halloweeny books I am gonna start reading like probably in August, to be honest, and we'll be reading until like November. So I'm really excited for that, and that seems like it's more of like more of a non-fiction book but about horror. So that will be kind of a good way to break up a lot of the fiction that I'll probably be reading in that time period. Speaking of ghosty books, my biggest disappointment book this year, though it wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be, is The Saturday Night Ghost Club, and I was speaking to somebody else and they kind of had a similar experience to me. This book is supposed to be kind of like a Stranger Things, set in the 80s and around Niagara Falls, and the main character is a teenager, and he kind of has developed a friendship with these two siblings. But the real main character, honestly, is his uncle, who's like into the paranormal and has this like paranormal shop outside of Niagara Falls for like tourists and stuff. And his uncle is like taking them around different places that like might have ghosts or are really spooky and things like that. And it wasn't a bad book, but it just wasn't keeping my attention at all. I feel like it just kind of like wandered around. There wasn't much plot, but I will say the ending did kind of make up for it. So if you are reading this book and you're like 3/4 of the way through or 2/3 of the way through, just finish it out, because I do think that the ending was interesting and it did kind of round out the book a little bit. But the book in itself was not as interesting as I thought it would be. And it wasn't like scary at all, which I kind of wanted it to be a little scary, because I do think Stranger Things is kind of scary. But the cover, amazing. Like, whoever designed this cover, usually the cover is not as good as the contents of the book, but I feel like this cover is a little bit better than the contents of the book. Though not a bad book. I would still say, like, read it if you want to. I gave it like 3 stars. I just really thought it was going to be a little bit more. And on the opposite end, my biggest surprise of a book, which I don't have because I put it actually into a free little library, was The Butterfly Lampshade. And this one I got from a free little library. I really didn't know anything much about it at all. I just grabbed it honestly because it looked really nice. And I think it was also set in LA, which I was at the time. I did a couple videos where this book was in, where I got the book and then I returned the book. Ooh. Yeah, The Butterfly Lampshade, really good book. I think it covers mental health really well. It was really interesting. It really kept my attention. A little bit of like magical realism, but more in the sense of like mental illness, if that makes sense. And I do like it when books do that. Next question is a book that made me cry, and I honestly don't cry that much with books. I don't know why. I think I usually like stop reading for a bit if I know I'm about to cry, and that's probably why I don't cry with books. But again, the book that definitely made me cry was The Stationery Shop. And I don't want to give away too much, but there's a lot of surprises and heartbreaks. That's not just the main plot of the book, that kind of came out of it as well. That definitely made me cry. Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah. And a book that made me happy, which a good amount of these books did make me happy, but definitely a book that made me like laugh and like made me like all like warm inside, was also a surprise book. I got it for free on Libby and I was like, okay, this sounds good. I think I was like on a flight. And this book is The Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen. And it is definitely, huge warning, it starts very spicy. And I was like, is this the kind of book I want to be listening to when I'm on a flight and somebody can overhear me? There's definitely spicy scenes in it for sure. But it doesn't really lead to that much plot. So if you want to skip it, you can skip it, because the plot itself is so cute and cozy and adorable, and it just like makes you so happy. This is a romance between Gareth, who I believe he's like a barrister or he's a lord. It's like one of those like, you know, Jane Austen-y worlds. It's a little bit of a lovers to enemies to lovers situation. So there's Joss Doomsday, who is gangster, like scoundrel of this area that Gareth now kind of like owns or rules or is like the lord of. Gareth did not think that he was ever going to inherit this land, but his father kind of mysteriously died out of nowhere. So it is like a romance, it is a mystery, it is cozy. I really, really enjoyed it. I just thought it was a great time. Okay, and then my longest section yet, which it's very long, is the books I want to read by the end of the year. And I have these books that I've talked about before, and it's not that I don't want to read them, it's just like I have not gotten to. And that's Kaikeyi, I believe. But it's just because it's like long, there's a lot of characters. I haven't had like the cognitive space to read this book. So I do want to read this book really soon, along with Hillary Justice, which is kind of like an AI robot battle, like kind of war book. Both of these books like seem like it's going to be a lot of cognitive space, but now I have more space in my head that I'm not studying like 20 hours a week. The books that I have discovered recently that I'm also really excited about, types of books I really gravitate to are cozy books, nonfiction morbid books, and then scammy books. I love learning about scams, and that's definitely like replaced a lot of like my true crime listening, is like listening about people's scams. Let me know if you want podcast recommendations for scam podcasts, because that's like all I'm listening to right now. Like, let me know in the comments below. There's two books that I found in the kind of cozy category. One is Something Close to Magic, and the other is In the Company of Witches. Both are kind of cozy fantasy. Something Close to Magic is about like a baker's apprentice. It sounds not necessarily like Alice in Wonderland. Her whole world's a fantasy world, but she gets into an adventure, and there's all sorts of characters and things like that, and it feels very cozy. And In the Company of Witches, it's like a light kind of mystery for these witches in New England who own a bed and breakfast. So that sounds really lovely, especially for the fall as well. For my kind of morbid book category, the one I think I'm most excited about is Cursed Objects by J.W. Octor, and this is a nonfiction book about like different famous cursed objects and the stories behind them. I think this will be a perfect book for September and October, especially October, but this will definitely get me in a spooky mood, especially if I want to be, again, reading a little bit more nonfiction, because there's going to be plenty of mystery, horror, all that kind of books that I can read too. And then last category is scams. And the first book, these two I'm like very, very excited about actually. I just like, oh yeah. But the first one is called Hey Hun. It's about like MLMs, pyramid schemes, but like a more modern take on it, because I feel like a lot of the books I've seen have been kind of like 10 or so years ago, and I feel like there's so much more that has happened that I want to learn about. And then the last one is Momfluenced, and this one is about like mom influencers and kind of ethics and things around that. I don't know too much about that one, but like enough information that I'm like absolutely stoked. If you've been this far into the video, thank you so much. Please give me a like and subscribe if you want to see more. What are books that maybe you think I should read that I would really enjoy? Please comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.